we're going to spend a little bit of time going through the accounting side and give you an idea of what some of those are. One thing that was brought through the cash flow module is a place where they brought together cash disbursements, cash receipts, bank reconciliations, payment authorizations, those things that in progression were kind of all over the place. So you had the cash disbursement function in AP, cash receipts in AR, BankRec, and was maybe in bank book. So a lot of that has now been centralized in this cash flow module. As I said, BankRec is one of the things that was added to the system. It's a graphical BankRec, and I don't have a lot of data here to share with you, but you'll see the idea. A graphical representation of outstanding deposits, outstanding checks, the balance on the account, and so on that you need to reconcile bank accounts. And if bank cash out clears, it's that simple to clear the items from an outstanding checklist. So online BankRec was a nice adder. In terms of cash receipts and other cash flow items, manual checks are cut here. Cash receipts are cut here. So, for instance, I'm going to go and enter a $1,000 deposit, and you see that it says the word receipt here. If I were to if I wanted to cut a manual check, I simply have to call it a -1,000. It calls it a payment, and then down in this section, I'm going to define customers and vendors and such. I'm going to add a deposit number, which is something that helps the bank statement function. Some other things that I can fill in here, but I'm actually going to just assign this to a customer. It's a deposit he's sent into our lockbox. So he's sent us $1,000. It's starting to build the GL transactions, and then I want to start allocating that $1,000 to invoices. And on the left are unapplied checks, and on the right are unapplied transactions that that would show up on his accounts receivable aging. These are unmatched deposits. I can go back in and say, show me all the deposits. I can click on a deposit that's already been matched, and it will show me where it's been matched to. So if this $10,000 check had been distributed amongst 6 invoices, all 6 of those would be highlighted on the right. I can take the $1,000, I can apply it towards as many invoices as I want. It tells me that I still have some money that I haven't distributed. Let's do that again. Yep, I got to go to the unmatched. There we go. And this tells me that they've still overpaid those 2 invoices by $208. And I can go ahead and say match and process those, which will apply the $208, the check amount to those. But now it's asking me what to do with the $208. And unlike progression, I have a number of options here. I can leave it a balance on their account. I can actually call it a refund. And if I call it a refund, it will show up on the AP cash disbursements function and allow me to cut a check to return their $208. In progression, that would have required a debit memo and a credit memo on the AP side, and it was very messy. Another option, depending on how you're set up, is if a single customer sends you a check to cover multiple AR accounts, you can actually take this $208 and you can actually reallocate it to another customer, and it will split the check and apply it, and it gives you an audit trail as to what it did with that. So a lot of functionality there that didn't exist in progression. As far as normal accounts payable process, there's a new word introduced in Macola called authorize, and it's kind of like the selection process that went on in AP in progression. This allows us to go in and say, I want to pay invoices through a certain date range, due date ranges, types of employees, which are resources, if I just want to do like an expense reimbursement, or suppliers, or everybody. A number of criteria here. I'm just going to go ahead and say, show me all the AP that I have out there. And now it presents to me everything that matched the criteria that I put in on the first screen. The process of paying these invoices is as simple as highlighting them, holding down the control key, and highlighting those that you want to pay. I can authorize those either by clicking a button, and then they'll be ready for a check to be cut. sometimes we have customers who divide these processes up. One person does the authorization, another one does the check. That works fine. And then another thing that was introduced in the Globe part of the accounting module in Macola ES is electronic banking. So by virtue of just flagging a vendor and or a transaction as being electronically paid, they still show up in the same selection process, but underneath the covers we know that, say, trendy products and this invoice is one that we're going to electronically pay. If I authorize that and process it, it will cut a check to the first three, and then it will electronically transmit a payment to trendy products through our bank and email an advice to them that they should expect an electronic payment. On the bottom here, I have $150,000 of invoices that I owe. I've selected $41,000 so I can manage, how much money it is that I want to spend on this AP cycle. There's a lot of functionality we won't get into. If you have invoices you want to block, you can block them. If you want to just delay the due date on this, you can move them forward 5, 10 days. You can split invoices. You can put part of an invoice on hold. So a lot of functionality there. I want to spend a minute on the AP side. Much of this is going to be the same. There's not much you can do differently in AP than you can do in progression. But there are a couple of things that were noteworthy. In terms of contact records, this is an AP vendor file. And in progression, you were very limited number of contacts you can maintain. We have the ability to have multiple contacts, many contacts as we want, and each has the ability to have multiple addresses. So if they work at different divisions, if we pay a lockbox as opposed to a visit address or a mail address, we can maintain all of that. You can see the same tab layout for segregating data. Over here, it talks about how we pay this customer by default, although we can change it when we put an invoice in, whether we send them a check or whether we send them an electronic payment. If we send them an electronic payment, what bank account do we fund, and so on. On the AR side, the only thing I'm really going to point out here, other than there are reports for agings and those types of things, is the same idea of maintaining a customer and looking at those contacts and addresses that you want to maintain. There's an unlimited amount of those. A lot of times our customers are maintaining this type of data in Outlook or Synergy or Goldmine or some CRM solution. We have plenty of room to accommodate those inside of the AR customer file. And then I was going to introduce to you a concept called cards. We're going to look at this some in the GL as well as AR and AP. A card is an analysis tool that allows us to go into that customer and pull up their record and take a look at, for instance, what their receivables balance is. That $1,000 that I entered, you'll see is right here. And as a matter of fact, both of them are right here. And because I didn't match those to invoices, they're still showing on the account as being unapplied. These invoices are due and payable. And each of these screens are drill-down screens. So from here, I see this invoice 166 for $4,000. I can actually click on this button and pulls up the source transaction for that invoice. In this case, it was invoice 166, it was order 61, and there are the items. And then this order screen becomes a drill-down as well. So getting back from their accounts receivable to the source is very easy to do. I can also, if I'm on the card view of this transaction, I can double-click on it and drill into the entire transaction. So there's the invoice amount, here's the distribution amount, and so on. So you see the entire journal entry from here. One thing to note is that I entered this $1,000 while we were going over the cash receipts, and I saved that without matching it to the invoice, and it is posted to the AR account. One of the key components of Macola ES is the elimination of the sub modules, where a GL distribution in one module is held in a sub module, distribution file until you do a process and post to subledger to GL at the end of the month or periodically. GL transactions that are happening in the submodules are impacting the GL immediately. So cash receipts is in the GL, inventory transactions in the GL immediately. It's as close to real-time accounting as you're going to get throughout the system, which was a hindrance on the progression side in that a lot of GL transactions were maintained in subledgers. So cards are an important part of the AR customer module and of the AP module. The same functionality exists for vendors and the ability to do an analysis. On the GL side, some of the features that I've found to be important to people is the first one we're going to talk about is the period date function. This gives us the ability, in progression you could lock down a module and stop people from doing certain things in certain modules. In Macola ES, it goes to another level that allows us to take a calendar year in this case, and then within the calendar year is a period calendar. And within the period calendar are open or closed functions. In Macola we call these, or ES we call these journals. A journal is attributed to a function. So if you look down here a little ways, you see there is an AP check register function and an AP transaction register. And why this is important, if during the month-end close process you want to make sure that you don't cut any more AP checks for that month, you can simply turn off that function. AP transactions can still be entered within that date range because that's not been closed, but you can no longer print checks. That month has been effectively closed for check. Same thing goes for sales journals and cash receipts and so on and so on. You can close an entire period. You can close an entire period but just leave the one general journal entry for month-end adjustments. Nothing else can go on in that month, and then you can close that later on. So people often ask, can you reopen journals and periods? There is no closing of periods in Macola ES. This is the way they're closed, and they're simply open and closed like that. Transactions are always online and real-time throughout the system. One more view of cards, and I like to start here just because the cards are powerful on the GL side in terms of doing an analysis. I'm just going to pull up a sales account. This is just a GL analysis that you might do in a spreadsheet. This allows me to go into a certain GL account, pick a date range, I'll just take all dates, and start to analyze what's going on in that GL account. So I'm going to start like this, and all the detail that's in that account is listed here. Where this really becomes powerful is that you can do certain things like grouping of that GL account, and you'll notice there's $103,000 in this revenue account. I want to group that by my customers. Same $103,000, but by which customer? So you see each of these customers has an amount, and there's some that's unapplied, could be a general ledger adjustment. But I also want to see what were my sales by item. Same $103,000 by item or by item category, something like that. And the reason that all of this is going on, and one of the things that ES brought that gives us a lot of analytical power, is that a general ledger journal entry and transactions from the subledgers are far more granular than they were in progression. In progression, you would have a debit account, a credit account, an amount, some basic descriptive information. Here, you've got a date, a transaction ID, like an invoice number, an amount. Out here, the customer's attached to that. That's coming up out of the subledger for invoicing. Out to the right, you'll have things like who the salesman was. Here's the part number for that inventory analysis. Here's the quantity of those items that was on that transaction. And it goes on through project accounting and so on. So all the granularity that is on a GL transaction from both the subledgers and the GL entry itself lends itself to this kind of analysis.